Greetings everybody and welcome back to the Home Slice. It's going to be an unusual episode today. This episode is actually a bit of a shout out. So my friend Elizabeth moved to the UK and she and her husband bought some inexpensive kitchen knives and a bunch of them broke and none of them really stay sharp or do the things that you would like for a knife to do. And so she reached out to me. She's like, hey, for a novice or just a normal person who wants functional kitchen knives, would you have any recommendation? And I realized that could be a video that's helpful for more than just them. So if you're my core viewers, there's probably not going to be anything new in this video for you. So if you guys want to take off, that's fine. If you want to stick around, I'd love to have you. But before we get into the video, I just want to say my friends Grady and Elizabeth, who this video is for, they moved to the UK and they had a child who has special needs. And I don't know if any of you, like in my viewership, have children that have special needs or medical complications, but they've just been through a really, really rough year or two and trying to take care of their son Ezra, who was born with a heart condition. He's had several surgeries. It's been really hard to get his feeding sorted out to where he's growing and becoming healthy, and there's been a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel lately. But anyway, I just want to start the video and honor them and say, Grady and Elizabeth, you guys are awesome. I really honor and respect the way that you guys are trying to honor God and do right by your son, and I love you guys a lot. Anyway, into kitchen knives. So this is my guide to kind of bare bones functional kitchen knives for the beginner or the entry-level consumer of cutlery. Okay, in my mind, the first thing that you need in the kitchen is some sort of workhorse paring knives. Now, many people would disagree. This video is going to have a lot of subjective views in it, but many people would say, oh, start with a really good chef knife. To be honest, the workhorse of my kitchen is like a medium length paring knife that is flexible enough to be used and not break, that has good enough heat treatment in the steel to keep an edge decently well, and that can be used for a variety of slicing tasks. Now, I've gone through sort of the different options in my mind, and what I've kind of settled on is that bang for buck, price to performance, my recommendation would be Victorinox. Simple Victorinox knives you can get at most homewares stores. Many, even like grocery stores, will carry a little range of these. They're usually on a little rack, and there's tons of different blade shapes and colors you can choose from. The handles are nothing fancy. They're comfortable, they're functional. But the main thing about Victorinox is that they are paying attention to what steel and what heat treatment that they use, and that is pretty rare at this price point to be putting a lot of intentionality into it. You can get a 4-pack. I checked a few days ago. There's a 4-pack of these 3.2 inch ones on Amazon for $16. So at $4 per paring knife, they're almost disposable. And the edge performance and the overall performance and the durability is good enough, you know? But the overall performance of a set of Victorinox paring knives, I don't think can be beat for $4. If some of my normal viewers disagree with me, you can throw a comment down in the comments if you know of a brand that I don't, but this would be my recommendation as of now, Victorinox paring knives. I will say that my wife and I really prefer the 4-inch or the 3.9 inch ones to the ones that are closer to 3 inches. It just gives you a little bit of extra versatility to have one of these guys. You can get through tomatoes and capsicum, or bell peppers as you call it in the States, or a whole apple with one slice. You never have to kind of do the nyeh. And so it adds an extra layer of versatility for us to have the 4 inches. I wouldn't go for the 3 inches. These are a little more expensive on Amazon. They're maybe $8.50, something like that. So Victorinox are widely available. They are very, very consistent quality-wise. If you learn to sharpen, they're enjoyable to sharpen. They have good enough steel and heat treatment in them. They have good enough durability. It's hard to beat them unless you pay a lot more money. If you're not a fan of kind of chunky plastic aesthetics, injection molded plastic, and you want something a little more classy that has the same level of performance, you can check out Opinel. This is a carbon steel Opinel. For your average user, I wouldn't recommend getting a carbon steel. In fact, if I was to buy this again, I probably wouldn't get the carbon steel. And I'll put a picture up right now of what they look like from the store. So they have kind of a blocky, lighter colored wood handle. Now, if you or your husband are wood crafty in any way, what I've done is I actually took that handle and I custom molded it to like my own hand shape, just with a file and a rasp and some sandpaper, so all the finger wells sort of fit where I grab it. And I've thinned it out a little bit and given it this nice, appealing look. And then I stained it this mahogany color. This is actually just a stock Opinel handle that I custom made to my own. So if you wanted to put some time into it, this is like a $10 paring knife, even for the stainless version, which I would recommend for beginners, getting stainless steel. The dark color on here is a patina that's formed through use because it's a carbon steel, and carbon steel, it has some kind of cool properties, but it kind of oxidizes and it makes your fruit and veggies like smell a little metallic. So I wouldn't recommend it for an entry level or a normal user. It also might rust in your dishwasher, so. But anyway, if you want like a little bit more of a classy look and you're willing to put some of your own elbow grease into it, an Opinel paring knife has that same beautiful centered blade shape. It's a similar length, not quite as long as the 4-inch Victorinox, but similar functionality, maybe a little bit more class. The steel in this will have just a tiny bit more carbon, and so you probably will experience a little bit better edge retaining or staying sharp. Okay, beyond that, if you got your paring knives sorted, you might ask some questions like, well, should I spend more money on a paring knife if it's the workhorse of my kitchen? This is just an opinion, but I would say no. I would say no. What I want in a paring knife is something that I don't have to worry about, that I don't have to worry about damaging or using, and at $8 or $10, I don't have to worry about these. Resharpening them, I don't worry about scratching them up. You wouldn't have to worry about throwing these in the dishwasher. It's like a worry-free blade. I wouldn't spend more, because if you spend more, you'll get something that's likely harder. It's actually, and it might be a bit more high carbon or brittle, and I just would steer clear of that. I would go simple for your paring knives, and I would go worry-free over fancy, to be honest. Going beyond that, people look on Amazon and there's all these flashy ads, right? And there's these blocks with tons of knives stuck into them. And I would just ask you, if you've ever had a relatively nice knife, or like a knife that's just your favorite, then how many other knives do you actually use? I find for me that actually it's more useful, rather than having a block with like 8 knives in it, to spend a little bit more money on 1 or 2 nice chef knives or santokus, and I'll go through what those are. And to me, honestly, I settle out at 2, 3, maybe 4 knives that I use predominantly in the kitchen, and I just wash and dry them frequently and take good care of them. And honestly, I would say spend a little bit more money per knife on a little bit better quality, buy less knives, use them more often, and in my experience, you'll actually get better enjoyment out of what you have. So I'm going to start at the lowest price and then work my way up in price, and you can settle out at whatever you would be willing to pay. So there's 2 main blade shapes that I would recommend for kitchen knife. There's the classic chef knife. They usually come about 8 inches long, and they have a acute point. And then there's a santoku blade. It's kind of Japanese inspired, but maybe the Japanese aspect is overplayed. It's kind of an Americanized or westernized version of a Japanese knife. Chef knives, you want, in my opinion, to be about 7 to 8 inches long to be capable enough to do rolling cuts and chops through stuff. And they have a nice point, so if you happen to get that bad spot in your potato or something like that, you can actually shift your grip up a little bit on the blade and carve something out with the tip, which I find to be really handy. I prefer chef knives overall to santokus, but there's a lot of people who really like the feel of a santoku, and that santokus tend to be a little bit smaller and they're a bit easier to control, and they don't have a tip that makes you kind of scared to use them or scared to poke yourself as much. So some people feel more comfortable and enjoy santokus more. So baseline quality, again, to be honest, I would say go Victorinox. If you want something that's just functional, that's durable enough, that has good enough ability to stay sharp that you're not going to have to worry about, Victorinox makes a line called Fibrox. I'll put the name up here and then I'll show some pictures. At the time when I filmed this video, a Victorinox Fibrox Santoku costs about $33 US on Amazon in the US. And it's about 6 or 7 inches, which is kind of the length that you want. If you prefer a chef knife, they have a very similar chef knife. The Fibrox chef's knife is $37. What I want to highlight about these is that they have really good resistance to rust. They're going to stay sharp decently well, and they're really like a nice but relatively worry-free blade, in my opinion. And if you go to like a fish market or a butchery or like some kind of a place where they use their knives hard all day long and they need them to do work and to get business done, they need them to be washable and to be able to get them really clean, more often than not, you will see them using Victorinoxes. You will see them using these Fibrox knives, maybe a slightly different model, but oftentimes the professionals who use knives day in and day out, unless they're like a swanky chef who has a custom Japanese forged thing, they'll have these Victorinox Fibrox style knives, or actually Victorinox themselves, because they're so easy to take care of. They're just real workhorses. So I would fully endorse and recommend getting a Victorinox Fibrox for a daily user. Beyond that, if you want to spend another, $5 to $10, and you want to get something that actually looks kind of nice, like if you opted for the Opinel paring knives and you're like, I'd like to get something that looks decently nice, there's a Japanese company called KAI. They use like a similar quality of steel to the Victorinox, but they make Japanese style knives that maybe look a little bit nicer. Their budget line is called Wasabi Black. Here's a picture of the chef knife of that line. These run about $44 on Amazon right now, which is a little bit more money, but it's a decent and it's a relatively good looking blade. They also make a 7-inch santoku, and their santoku right now is going for about $38. So if you're willing to put a little bit more money in for similar quality and durability with perhaps a slightly nicer aesthetic, the KAI Wasabi Black line is quite a good option. Now, I will go into some higher tier knives, not ultra high, still affordable, but higher tier, but my caveat here is this. You can spend more money on these mainstream lines like J.A. Hinkle's, Zwilling, or Wusthof, I suppose, would be the correct German pronunciation. Or Victorinox themselves even has a forged line of blades that would be slightly higher quality. In my experience, these ones look nicer. They maybe have maybe a bit of a nicer, fancier feel to them. And if that's important to you, you can totally go for it. I would say the metal and the heat treat that you're gonna get is not going to be that much improved from just getting a basic Victorinox or KAI. What you're really paying for is the aesthetic appeal or getting a personalized look. Now, if you would like to learn to sharpen or have your knives sharpened or serviced frequently, then I would say it might be worth it to invest in some steel that has a little bit higher carbon content, is maybe a little bit more fun to sharpen, or holds an edge a bit longer. If you're sharpening your own knives, it is a bit rewarding to have a knife where the sharpness just stays around a little bit longer. The work that you did has a longer payoff. I would say, and my caveat is, don't spend a ton of money on a knife if you're not going to have it regularly sharpened, or if you're not going to learn to do some level of sharpening yourself. And the reason that I say that is because given about 6 to 9 months, you really won't be able to tell the difference between a Victorinox and a really super fancy knife that has Japanese VG10 steel in it or something like that. You just won't be able to actually discern the difference over time, because all edges get beat up and a little bit chipped, and they all round themselves out to this sort of working edge level of sort of semi-dull, and a really premium knife over the long haul, unsharpened, is not going to be that much better. If you're willing to have your knives serviced, or you have a home sharpening system, or you learn to hand sharpen yourself, then I would recommend getting slightly better steel. There's two brands that I would endorse. I would say there's a new brand called Tucson, and they have a santoku knife that costs about $46, so not a lot more than the KAI, but you're getting a steel that has more carbon content, it's a little bit harder, it's a little bit more enjoyable to sharpen, and that edge is going to be stable and it's going to stick around a long time. It's going to stay sharp for you. They also have a really attractive looking chef's knife for $55 on Amazon right now, and Tucson would be just a tiny bit more money for quite a discernible increase in edge performance, I would say. If you want to spend a little bit more money, you will get something that is a little bit harder, and I would say only invest in these if you're going to learn to sharpen, because if you don't learn to sharpen, then the extra hardness may be detrimental rather than helpful. But there's a Japanese company called Shun, and they have a budget line called the Sora line. Well, budget for them. And their santoku is about $90, and their chef knife is $100. And these knives, I've had quite good experience with them. They do have a good aggressiveness to them. They sharpen up really nice, and they have a good level of hardness to them. So if you're willing to sink a little bit more money into something that's a little bit fancier and take care of it, the Shun Sora line is a pretty safe, consistent, dependable investment in my personal experience.